Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. Spoiler season, the final day is wrapping up. Okay, sorry, I don't know why I did that. Anyways, this morning, Containment Construct came out, and it just changed my perspective on just how mad a card can be. I mean, this card is pure madness. And if that card is pure madness, then Invigorating Hot Springs is pure fire, because Hot Spring, I guess they're not really on fire, they're just hot. Anyways, Hot Springs. And also, well, as we say farewell to spoiler season, we say hello to farewell, if that makes any sense to you at all. Because we have now confirmed that Farewell is indeed a real card, and my goodness, is this thing explosive to say the least. But before you go check out those episodes, make sure you stay tuned for this episode where we talk about Value Town. Okay, the card's actually not called Value Town, but it is very much a Value Town kind of card with Roadside Reliquary. I'm sorry I've had too much coffee today. Anyways, let's jump into it. So, Roadside Reliquary, not Reliquary Tower, but Roadside Reliquary, which might be near Reliquary Tower. I just drank a second cup of coffee, I'm sorry, I am just all over the place. Here we go, back at it. It's a land that taps for a colorless, and we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it to draw a card if you control an artifact, and draw a card if you control an enchantment. So this might seem like a very simple land, and well, it is. It is a pretty simple land. I mean, it comes into play untap, which is great. It taps for a colorless, but it has a lot of potential and a good amount of decks out there. Again, it's not saying draw a card if you control an artifact or an enchantment. It lets you draw a card if you control an artifact or if you control an enchantment, and if you control both, you are getting to draw 2 cards from 1 land. And yes, you're going to be going down a land to sacrifice this, but at a certain point of the game, you really might be desperate for card draw, and you might already have a ton of lands in play. Again, the later and later the game goes, the more valuable this becomes to have the potential to just draw you 2 cards, again, just on a land. So this card really doesn't have a lot of downside. I mean, if it's in a deck that can actually, afford to include a land that can tap for colorless instead of, helping with mana fixing, yeah, I mean, this card is just all upside when it comes to the potential that it has to help fuel you and help you kind of push through at the very end of a game to actually draw into those cards that you need to win. In other words, Roadside Reliquary is Value Town. Now, obviously, this is not for every kind of a deck out there. I mean, if you don't have any, artifacts or enchantments in your deck, which is highly unlikely, then yeah, don't include this card because it won't be doing anything for you, really. That being said, yeah, if you've got a deck that's maybe 1 or 2 colors that is heavy into artifacts or enchantments, great. And if it's a deck that is 1 or 2 colors that is heavy into both, my goodness, can this provide you a lot of value in a lot of situations where, well, other lands just can't do that. And, well, okay, can't do that quickly. I'm going to point out some other lands, obviously, that can help you in similar ways. But this one, again, for 2 mana by sacrificing the land, can draw you 2 cards right away if you meet its requirements. So let's jump into some somewhat similar lands that we've seen in the past that tap for colorless and help us draw as well. So first up, in the past few years, we've gotten some good ones recently. I mean, like Archeraska, which I guess came out way back in Ixalan, I think? Anyways, Archeraska is a land that has Ascend, and it has tap, add colorless, or pay 5 and tap, draw a card, activate this only if you have the City's Blessing. So getting the City's Blessing is a very easy requirement to meet in Commander. Yeah, again, you just need 10 permanents and you essentially get it. And obviously, you don't have to actually sacrifice this land to get that card advantage. That being said, again, it is a lot more expensive to get that card advantage, but if you've got the mana just lying around, sure, why not? Utilize it. Again, at a base level, let's just say that you have just an artifact, non-artifact, and an enchantment. You can pay 2 mana, sacrifice the Roadside Reliquary to draw 1 card, so that's 2 mana, the loss of a land to draw 1 card. And that is still a 3 mana difference, though, from Archeraska, which again draws you 1 card for 5 mana. Although, technically, okay, when I do say 5 mana, and I did say 2 on Roadside Reliquary, kind of again, because you are utilizing the actual land itself, Roadside Reliquary is kind of like 3 mana technically, because you are tapping it as well, and Archeraska is kind of like 6 mana, but still. But yeah, again, at the high end of Roadside Reliquary, if you've got both an artifact and an enchantment in play, which, you know, happens quite a bit in Commander. I mean, even in decks that aren't, you know, specifically focused on artifacts and enchantments, decks are bound to have both in them. Well, you get to draw 2 cards again for tapping the land and paying 2 mana, versus Archeraska, you tap the land twice, and you have to pay 10 mana in total. So again, it's a slower process to actually get those cards, and it costs a lot more mana. Now, I'm definitely not saying this is a bad card. It is not. It is a good card, but still, Roadside Reliquary can actually help you get to those cards quicker in the right situations. But again, at the cost of actually losing your land, which actually in some scenarios, and we'll talk about those here in a bit, that can actually be a benefit. Next up, how about War Room? It taps for a colorless, and you pay 3 and tap it to pay the life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. So obviously, the less colors that your commander has in their color identity, the better that this card gets. So you are going to be paying some life to draw a card. Well, unless you've got a colorless commander, then congratulations, it's free essentially. But yeah, still, you are drawing those cards over multiple turns. And, you know, again, with the kind of high upside of Roadside Reliquary, you can draw 2 at once. That being said, obviously, paying life versus extra mana is usually more beneficial in most situations. So War Room in some decks definitely has a leg up on Archeraska. And so actually does Bonder's Enclave in the right deck. It can tap for a colorless, and by paying 3 and tapping it, you draw a card. Activates ability only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So if you've got a creature-centric deck, or, you know, even just a commander that happens to have 4 or greater power, well, this can be an easy way to draw cards with it. But yeah, all these lands are fantastic, and I am definitely not knocking on any of them. But again, if you are absolutely desperate and need to draw cards quickly, and you meet the requirements for Roadside Reliquary, well, you can draw quicker with that. Moving on really quick, just some other lands that do see play in Commander that I do want to highlight are cards like Seagate Wreckage, Mikokoro, Center of the Sea, and Cryptic Caves. Seagate Wreckage taps for a colorless, and by paying 2 and a colorless and tapping it, you draw a card, but you can only activate this ability if you have no cards in hand. Now, not having any cards in hand is a very bad thing for the most part in games of Commander, and yeah, obviously this can help you out of a tough spot, but you probably don't want to try to actually get to that spot to get advantage off of this card. Next up, Mikokoro Center of the Sea is a legendary land that taps for a colorless, and you can pay 2 and tap, and each player draws a card. So yes, this one is very efficient mana-wise when it comes to actually drawing cards. Again, it has the exact same cost and activation, you know, except for, you know, actually have to sacrifice it, which you don't have to sacrifice this one in comparison to our new Roadside Reliquary, but this one does benefit all players, and there are some decks that can take advantage of this, and other decks, you know, that are like group hug decks that actually want this to work in the way that it does. But when it comes to actually just benefiting yourself and gaining card advantage on your opponents, obviously Roadside Reliquary is superior in that way. The card that Roadside Reliquary actually reminds me the most, though, has got to be Cryptic Caves. It's a land that taps for a colorless, and you pay 1 to tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. Activates ability only if you control 5 or more lands. So obviously there are some differences between this and Roadside Reliquary, and this can be better in certain situations and definitely worse in others. Now, that is a requirement, again, activates ability only if you control 5 or more lands, but typically you're probably not going to be wanting to sacrifice your lands if you've only got 4 or less of them, though if you're in dire straits early in the game, maybe? Regardless, by sacrificing this 1 land, you get to draw 1 card, which obviously, you know, it's kind of like replacing itself, which is nice, but it obviously doesn't have the same upside that Roadside Reliquary does. And again, like I mentioned before, it's really not all that hard. I mean, even decks that aren't trying to specifically work around artifacts or enchantments, they eventually, you know, might just get out an artifact and enchantment and be able to meet both requirements. And of course, especially in decks that are focused on artifacts or enchantments or both, you're going to be able to meet this requirement more often. Now, obviously, again, like I said, Roadside Reliquary is not for every deck, but let's quickly go through some commanders that might want to consider it. I mean, Hope of Gearpor was probably one of the first cards that actually came to mind. A 1/1 Thopter with Flying that costs 1. Yeah, so this is a colorless commander that, well, allows you to heavily utilize, you know, those colorless utility lands because it doesn't really matter. I mean, they are just essentially better versions of waste. And obviously, of course, Hope of Gearpor is an artifact itself, so it meets one of those requirements. Now, please correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there are actually any colorless enchantments out there. I could be wrong, and I probably, you know what, I'm just going to look that up right now. I am wrong, there are 2. So yes, if you are running Eldrazi Conscription, a tribal enchantment, Eldrazi Aura, or Urza Saga, you know, that land that is an enchantment land, Urza Saga, then yeah, you can meet both requirements. So there you go. And of course, there are plenty of other, artifact creature commanders out there, like, say, Bosch Iron Golem, which still has, just one color in its color identity with red, so it can afford to utilize a lot of those colorless utility lands as well. And yeah, I mean, again, this one already meets the requirement for an artifact, and against Enchantment Red, you very well might have some effective enchantments that work well with Bosch, so if you've got both an artifact and enchantment in play, this is a perfect fit for this kind of a deck. And on the other side of things, of course, there are commanders out there that are actually enchantments themselves, like, the gods of Theros, like Karametra, God of Harvest. And these gods generally have either one or two colors, so yeah, I mean, including, again, a colorless land isn't really all that big of a deal. And then also, again, on top of that, Karametra is just a fantastic commander when it comes to ramping. She has, whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. So, yeah, you're not going to be short on lands with a commander like this, so you can afford to include a land that, if you need to, you can sacrifice to draw some cards. And of course, with a deck built around Karametra, you very well might have some artifacts in that deck as well, so you can benefit, again, with that double draw. Another thing to consider might be a commander that actually creates something like an artifact, like Eloise Nephalia Sleuth. She has, whenever another creature you control dies, investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil 1. So Eloise can actually work very well with this card. I mean, first of all, whenever another creature you control dies, you investigate, so you get a clue token, and again, that's an artifact, so that counts. And then on top of that, whenever you sacrifice a token, you surveil 1, so you can actually look at the top card of your library and know what that is. If it's, good, keep it on top, and then, if you need to actually sacrifice, your land to draw into that and maybe something else, you can. And also, there are plenty of great enchantments out there that work really well with Eloise too, so yeah, the chances that you actually have an artifact and enchantment both in play are, not bad at all. Moving on, yeah, I mean, when it comes to a monocolored commander, this is definitely a land that you really want to consider, again, because it's a good utility land, and again, it's not really taking up any kind of a mana fixing spot, because you don't really need any mana fixing for a monocolored deck. So yeah, Oswald Fiddlebender, a fantastic artifact-centric commander, can really utilize a card like this. You are pretty much guaranteed to at least have one artifact in play with this commander, and then also, yeah, again, I keep saying this, but if you also have an enchantment, cool, you hit both requirements, and now you're paying, again, 2 mana and tapping the land and losing it, but yeah, you get to draw 2 cards. Also, I did mention earlier that there are certain commanders out there that actually want you to sacrifice lands, like, Titania, Protector of Argoth. She has, when she enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and on top of that, whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. So, first up, if you happen to sacrifice, that land to draw some cards before Titania comes into play, you can get Titania in play to get it right back out. And then, of course, on the other end, if you sacrifice that land when she's in play, well, now you get a 5/3 green elemental creature token on top of those cards or card that you're going to be drawing. So yeah, definitely a consideration for this monocolored commander. And speaking of a commander that likes to sacrifice lands and draw cards, how about the Gitrog monster? It's a 6/6 with Death Touch that says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever one or more land cards are put in your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. So again, the ceiling is actually even higher for Roadside Reliquary with this commander because, hey, if you sacrifice it and you get, the 2 cards off of it with an artifact and enchantment in play, you're drawing 2 from that. And also, again, the Gitrog monster's trigger, you draw an additional card. And of course, the Gitrog monster is completely fine with you sacrificing lands, again, getting extra value, and you also can just play additional lands. And of course, there are plenty of ways for the Gitrog monster to get lands back, in your hand in that kind of a deck, or even just play them from your graveyard too. So that individual land can essentially become a pretty good draw engine for this deck if you're set up properly. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Roadside Reliquary. Again, there have been a ton of exciting spoilers from this set, and this is definitely one that I can see people sleeping on, and well, for the right deck out there, this thing can be absolutely incredible in the right situation. Again, maybe even just the next time that you're playing a game of Commander, just kind of toward the later turns, maybe just take a look at your board, see if you happen to have an artifact or an enchantment or both, then, I think chances are pretty high that, there's a good amount of situations where you end up having both, even in decks that aren't, necessarily artifact or enchantment specific. And for those decks that are, well, the percentage chance is going to be even higher that you meet these requirements. And again, the burst draw potential that this has is really not seen on lands, so yeah, I think that this card has a ton of potential in a good amount of decks out there. But yeah, this has been a really exciting spoiler season, and I am still hoping that there's some more exciting spoilers coming out, so make sure you stay tuned to this channel to find out if even more exciting spoilers are on the way. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.